All right, everybody, if we could take your seats, quiet down, we'll get the meeting going for the 9th of April. Thank you all for being here. We'll do roll call real first. Steve Ball. Phoebe Bensiger.
Here.
Ron Cairns. Here. Bryce Gaber is absent. Chad Huffman. Here. Delphine Jadot. Richard Rogers. Here. And I'm David Fishering, and I'm here. Do approval of the minutes from our last meeting on the 26th of March.
I make a motion to approve as presented.
Thanks, Phoebe.
I second it.
Thanks, Delphine. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Staff, any additions or deletions from the agenda?
Nope, there are none.
Okay. In that case, if I read it right, we've got one agenda item.
Yep.
So, onward.
So this is a sketch plan application for a proposed subdivision known as Leonard Farms, which is located on multiple properties between Ogden Road, Otter Road, and Kinnikin Road. Otter Road does split the property, not in half, but the proposal is on both sides of Otter, and the south side of Ogden, and the north side of Kinnikin. In total, the property is approximately 264.3 acres in size. There are several zoning districts across the property. Some of it's zoned R3 medium density district, some R3A medium high density district, R4 high density district, and B4 neighborhood shopping district. The delineation of the zoning districts is shown in the zoning map here. These are the zoning districts approved by the City Council when these were annexed, which most of this was annexed as part of the Pioneer Ranch annexation in 2008. And the northeastern property annexed as the Leonard Farm Edition in 2024. The total sketch plan proposes 547 single-family residential lots and up to 1,296 multifamily and/or townhomes, and potentially some commercial and mixed-use development in the commercially zoned portion at the northern end of the property. Just so the public understands the process of a subdivision, there are multiple steps involved with any major subdivision, which a major subdivision is 4 lots or more. The first step is the sketch plan, which shows the applicant's idea of the proposed subdivision at full build-out. That's what we're talking about today. The application goes in front of the Planning Commission for review and comment. However, there will be no vote tonight, and this will not be approved or denied. This is an opportunity for the Planning Commission and the public to provide feedback on the proposal, and the applicant will ideally take this feedback into consideration for the future development. Eventually, the applicant will need to submit a preliminary plat, which is a more formal document, more formally engineered and platted, and that will require traffic impact studies, utility plans, engineering plans, et cetera. And that will come back to the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. A preliminary plat may or may not cover all or just a portion of the overall subdivision, but would include a phasing plan for the proposal. If it is approved, that would permit the applicant to begin infrastructure improvements. And finally, the applicant will need to submit a final plat, which would formally create lot lines and individually conveyable properties once the infrastructure is in place in order to serve those properties. And so if this does move forward, there will be other steps, but right now, no formal decisions are being made. As mentioned, there's multiple zoning districts across the property. The R3 medium density district is intended to provide an area suitable for single-family detached, single-family attached, or duplex dwellings, along with certain other compatible land uses. The R3A medium high density district provides for an area suitable for single household attached, triplex, fourplex, and other medium density multi-household dwellings. R4 high density is primarily for higher density, of course, and allows variety in single household and duplex dwellings and other development types. And the B4 zoning provides for small scale retail shopping and services convenient to residential neighborhoods. The properties are adjacent to properties that are zoned R1 very low density district, R1B small estate district, R2 low density district, R3 medium density district, R3A medium high density district, B4 neighborhood shopping district, and areas outside of city limits. According to the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, this area is designated partially as residential mixed density medium, which indicates the area is appropriate for a variety of residential types mixed within a neighborhood, including single-family, townhomes, duplexes, and triplexes. Some is designated as residential mixed-density high, primarily intended for attached buildings on individual lots, such as townhomes, as well as multifamily structures, such as apartments and condos. The secondary center designation is intended to provide a mix of retail and service uses that are convenient to surrounding neighborhoods while reducing the need for cross-city traffic. and serve as a focal point for pedestrian activity. And the neighborhood center is intended for small mixed-use commercial uses such as limited convenience shopping and office and professional services. This is the first page of the sketch plan itself, and these first 2 pages here demonstrate the existing conditions of the property. And for the public, I know that these can be difficult to see on the screens here. However, all of these documents are available in tonight's public meeting packets and are much easier to see there. So this is the portion of the property between Ogden and Otter Roads. Again, this is these are existing conditions. And then this is the portion south of Ogden Road and stretches all the way down to Kinnikin Road. These next 2 pages show approximate proposed lot layouts and utilities. Again, this portion is between Ogden and Otter Roads. Of course, the lots will also require right-of-way dedication in order to service the lots, and this map shows proposed water, sewer, detention ponds, and other utilities. And then again, this portion shows the area south of Otter Road, as well as the tail that goes all the way down to Kinnikin. And then finally, this page shows a proposed phasing plan. Obviously, being such a large area, this subdivision is not going to be built quickly. This is likely going to take years and years. And so the applicant has provided this phasing plan to show the approximate order of when this would be built. If and when this does go to preliminary plat, that will also likely require a phasing plan, which might be different from what's shown here, but we don't know yet. This also shows the open space dedication, and we've also required the developer to, in the future, dedicate the land, some land to the city for the development of a public park, which would be owned by the city and open to the public. And then finally, this last page is the phasing plan on the south side of Otter Road. This also shows approximately how many single-family homes and multifamily or townhomes would be built within each phase within the white squares shown on the phasing plan. Again, this can change if and when this does move forward, but again, that's not being voted on tonight. I will turn it over to Scott at this point to go over some of the infrastructure considerations applicable here. Scott, take it away.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. As Will mentioned, none of these are designed yet as far as the detailed design for all the infrastructure pieces. But just for the benefit of the guests here tonight, I'll spend a little bit of time running through kind of the sideboards and process for all the various infrastructure pieces, because I think it'll help some of the discussions going into tonight. So I'll run through all these up here, and if you have questions along the way, feel free to let me know. So on the water side of things, they will have to design this with their preliminary plat to demonstrate full fire protection and water availability for the subdivision. From a water resources standpoint, we do have the water available to service this. The northern portions, north of Otter, sorry, getting a little feedback. North of Otter are within the city's water service area. South of Otter Road, it's within Tri-County's water service area. In any case, regardless of the service area, they have to demonstrate the hydraulic capacity and obviously water resource capacity to service the development. On the sewer side of things, similarly, they have to model all the sewer flows. This would go to the city's treatment plants within our service area and demonstrate availability of capacity all the way down to the treatment plant. Some of the preliminary stuff has identified the ability to service that, but they'll dive deeper and have to get that approved as part of their site development, or for their subdivision approval. On the drainage side of things, for the most part, the drainage will go to Dry Cedar Creek, which splits down through the middle of a lot of it. Before doing that, though, they have to run it through detention ponds that will be sized and designed to meet detention for water quality and water quantity. So on the water quality side, the intent is to have a minimum settlement time to settle out solids and uptake some of the oils and nutrients before it discharges into the Dry Cedar Creek. And then on the water quantity side, they have to demonstrate that, you know, when you have a new neighborhood, you have a lot more impervious area. The storms are a lot more run off a lot more quickly and could increase flows in Dry Cedar Creek. And so they have to put in all those ponds, which then throttle those flows so that what does come out is not larger than what was coming into Dry Cedar Creek from a flow standpoint, peak flow standpoint, pre-development, so that you're not contributing to downstream flooding or excessive erosion or anything like that. Traffic is always the biggest one. So in this case, it's obviously big enough that it would trigger a full traffic study. And with that, depending on the phasing and the filings, those studies accompany that preliminary plat. And those look at availability or capacity of the existing roadways and intersections that this would be feeding into. The biggest one to think about is the minor arterial network. So this is primarily set up to have more or less direct access to the minor arterial network, so they're not shortcutting through neighborhoods and things of that sort. The main north-south road you see going through the sketch plan is the extension of Bridges Drive. So because of topography and sequencing, it'll start where it's being worked on right now, actually by the Falls at Valley Ranch subdivision, and kind of jog towards the west. We're working on finalizing the alignment with both developers, come onto Otter Road, and then go out. So, those initial phases will look at the capacity of that road, of Otter Road, to take the additional traffic. They compare those to established standards for, the capacity of the intersections, and identify if anything needs to be done off-site improvements. So eventually, inevitably, all of these get widened to a minor arterial standard. So Otter Road does classify as a minor arterial in our comp plan, has for decades. This extension to connect the two has always been in the comp plan. And so they're essentially working to match the comp plan as they go, but the full build-out won't occur right off the bat. We don't build roads until they're justified. And so that's what the studies will do, is look at what point do you need to improve either off-site intersections, widen roads, and those, the off-site stuff typically gets built into the city's capital plan to work to stay ahead of those. A good example is East Oak Grove Road. So until about 10 years ago, it's not too different than Otter. Otter has a little more vertical curvature issues, but if you remember, Oak Grove by Walgreens was a little 20-foot wide, 2-lane road until about 10 years ago. With all the coming around it, as cities expand, eventually you get enough density and enough traffic that it then warrants widening and improving those roads over time. So that won't happen right off the bat, but long range, eventually Otter would be built to a minor arterial standard, which is like the new East Oak Grove, South Hillcrest extension, 6700 extension. Those are all our standard minor arterial templates. So, and then on the pedestrian connectivity, so with each filing, we will work with them to make sure that they have good internal circulation for their pedestrians. Obviously, all new city streets have sidewalks both sides, all of that. But we also want to make sure that the neighborhood is connected into our network, which, we've been making good progress in Ogden. We got up to the apartment buildings. This is kind of the next logical progression. We just got across the canal. There's another apartment project coming in just east of there. This is kind of the next logical progression to keep moving the Ogden connection up towards the east. And depending on their phasing, we'll work to make sure that they have pedestrian connections into the city. And that's good. It's a really good development from a proximity to the urban core. That infrastructure exists where you get, versus some of these other neighborhoods that are, like Brown Ranch or Waterfall Canyon, that are far out from town. You end up kind of with these isolated appendices that you have big gaps and you don't have city property or right-of-way to get connections. This has got that working in its favor. You'll be able to get a lot better pedestrian connections for both the residents and for anybody else looking to walk through the area. On the infrastructure side of things, so people understand the process, when the infrastructure is built, it's all built by the developer at their cost. And so they go through, they submit all the civil plans, we review to make sure, and usually goes 3 or 4 iterations to make sure we get it right. All the plans get approved, and then it has to be built, to our specs. We inspect throughout. We have to certify it that it's to our specs upon completion. Their engineer, licensed engineer, has to certify it upon completion, and only then can they get a final plat for that filing. I did receive one call saying, "Oh, this is going to raise our taxes." No, this is all built by the developer and then accepted as city infrastructure. So once it's completed, it gets accepted as public streets, public waterways, things of that sort. Or not public waterways, but public water lines, sewer lines. And then those just become part of city infrastructure, just like all the other neighborhoods around it. And then I did want to speak about the rate of build out as well. So this will obviously, as Will alluded to, happen in many filings, over 10 is their current plan. These things don't happen overnight. So our typical rate of absorption, we're seeing about 200 building permits a year is kind of our stable number. Of that, even worse, our highest rate, say 50 were over here. You take 1,500 units divided by 50, that's multiple decades to build this out. Waterfall Canyon, Brown Ranch are similar neighborhoods. they've been in the works for 20 years and aren't even half built out. So they do take time. It won't be a drastic overnight change, but the way the whole reason for the comp plan, the road networks, and the road classifications is to make sure that as these build-outs do occur, that connections are maintained, the roads are wide enough so they have the rights of way to support what will eventually be just a continual expansion of the city. Cities just grow outward, and it takes time, but we want to make sure that all the infrastructure is there to support it as they go, and that's what this whole process is set up for. So, good. Any questions kind of at this level? Obviously, we'll be here to answer questions if they come up, but any questions at this stage on the infrastructure side of things?
Scott, I've got a question about, if you could answer for the public, obviously none of these studies have been done at this stage. It's not a requirement as part of bringing this before the Planning Commission here. So we don't have traffic studies, we don't have all the stuff engineered. At the time that the applicant makes the next submission for the preliminary plat, and those studies have been done, are those studies accessible by the public?
Yes, they are available, and I think planning is actually working on a portal, especially on some of these bigger ones. So, yeah, those can easily be made available.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, that's a great point. So, yeah, it's a great time to comment on these because those will feed how they set up those studies and kind of considerations to make sure they address in those studies, especially on like the traffic side of things. Because, yeah, we don't have answers. We don't know what those numbers are yet until they do those studies.
And so my follow-up question on that would be Otter Road, I think is one of the number one concern that we've had in writing before today. And so can we speak in front of the public about how Otter Road can be affected? As you say, this doesn't happen overnight. We do know that Otter Road would need help. The current road does not suit the traffic that would come in from the new subdivision. So can you speak of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's relevant to speak to tonight for sure, the concerns. We'll refer to the studies and the data. So I don't think we can definitively say Otter Road can't take one more car. The studies would kind of say what capacities do exist and at what point you kind of cross a threshold to where you would worry about safety or intersection capacity. Yep. So those would come at the preliminary plat stage, but yes, Otter Road is very relevant. The other things that go into it, and we've been working, because they've done some preliminary work, just some preliminary due diligence on making sure before they even start, you have really rough capacities on water and sewer, and we've had discussions on, with the Otter Road alignment sequencing such that, that connection is not made until Otter Road can support it. Same thing like we have on 6700 at Oak Grove. That connection hasn't been made because once you do, you now need all these other intersections to be improved to support it. So those are the kind of things that play into the city's capital planning, and we work with them on their sequencing. Eventually it will connect, but there's a strategy to possibly developing the north end isolated, the south end isolated, and not connecting right off the bat. But all of that will be worked out at the preliminary plat stage.
Yeah, this is kind of far out time-wise, but I believe schools will probably come up. You're probably looking over 1,000 students when all this is said and done. Even it's going to be 20, 30 years out before it's done. When will the city look at, they would have to consider building a school? Or is the school that's right down the street capable of handling hundreds of new students? How does that work?
I can take that, or you just want to? It is part of the consideration. It's not a city-led piece, so I mean, maybe, do you guys want to talk about that, or I can?
Yeah, we can tag team it here, but, so we do meet with the school district. We have fairly regular meetings with some of their data people on areas in the city that we've identified as, areas for potential future growth. Obviously not just this area, but anything that is, annexed into the city and zoned, but not necessarily developed yet, or areas within the comprehensive plan that have been identified as potential areas for future growth. And so we do, work with them on, identifying where it might be appropriate in order to, on their end, to make school enhancements to existing school buildings. Or we do also have in our code with every preliminary plat, we require a plat note, a preliminary plat and final plat. We require a plat note either dedicating school land to the school district or with each unit, and it comes at time of building permit, each unit there is a fee in lieu of school land dedication fee And that fee is collected at the time of building permit and goes to the school district for improvements to existing school infrastructure. Do you have anything to add, or that cover it?
No, yeah, I think you covered it. Yeah, that was the big component, is that, that school impact fee per building permit is really dedicated specifically for land dedication or land purchasing by the school district. The school district will be involved in the preliminary plat review and the final plat reviews that come to follow, but they're certainly in the loop throughout the whole process here, so.
Will, you, excuse me, you alluded to the park subject. Can you go into a bit more detail on how that park subject is handled and/or additional fees in lieu of dedicated park land?
Yeah, so where appropriate, we do also have a plat note. Again, at the time of building permit, there's a fee collected in lieu of parkland dedication, which goes towards, obviously, maintenance of the park. In this instance, within our comprehensive plan, we do have a kind of overall park master plan identifying areas in the city that are appropriate for future parks. And they're approximate locations. They're not, it's not a plan that shows exactly where we want to park. But during the, review of this application, it was identified that it would be appropriate to have a public park in this subdivision. And so we are going to require, if this does move forward, we are going to require land dedicated to the city to be owned and operated by the city as a public park. Obviously that'll come with future filings. It won't necessarily be immediate, but at full build out, there will be required to be a public park in this subdivision.
Thank you. The phases. There's multiple phases already identified with the different colors and roughly phase 1 through 10, and don't quote me that there's 10 phases. If the builder eventually wants to kind of change and build number 8 sooner than number, are they required to stick with that exact plan, or can they make changes later associated with which phase goes first based upon market conditions, you could say?
Well, any subdivision, you can make changes. It just depends on the process in order to make those changes. So if they do come up with a phasing plan that's approved in the preliminary plat, and then for whatever reason it does need to be changed later on, they can submit an amended preliminary plat, which will identify, how the phasing plan will change. Another thing to keep in mind is a preliminary plat is valid for 5 years. So if this is not going to take or be done within 5 years, when and if there are future amended preliminary plats that need to be submitted because the previous preliminary plat has expired, that will also need to be re-reviewed. The phasing plan could change at that time. It could stay the same. It doesn't matter. It still needs to come back before the Planning Commission and City Council. And I think part of that is, and maybe Scott can speak to it as well, but part of that is some of the kind of impact studies are done in accordance with the proposed phasing plan. And so, if there are amendments, there may need to be amendments to those impact studies.
Yeah, it's pretty common in a lot of subdivisions that the phasing plan does change, and that's why we like them on the plat, because it makes it so it has to come back to the boards and go through a public process, because there are implications if changes in phasing on traffic, infrastructure, things of that sort. So it gives us a chance to make sure that all of that still works, and obviously the public is aware of, there's not a bait and switch or something, so that it all stays clear of what's being done when. But it is pretty common that market drives or just development patterns change, and it does change the phasing.
Thank you.
I have one more about the parks. Being city park, it can take anywhere from 20 to 30 years to build that, if I am correct. It's not going to be done with the subdivision. It will be done really long-term after these subdivisions are done.
Yeah, we can't promise any hard dates, but generally about 50% build-out is typically kind of a good planning number of when you would think about doing a park, because you have the kind of critical mass to make it worth it. You don't want to park out there all by itself, being mowed every week for 10 users, things of that sort. But generally, we try and target around 50%. There are exceptions to that, because parks are not cheap either, and so it obviously depends on budget availability and other priorities as well. So there are some that are in neighborhoods that are built out that haven't been built yet, admittedly, so it does take some time.
Sorry, is the applicant here? No? Maybe? Mr. Miles, do you want to come up now, or do you want to come up at the end? Up to you.
It's up to you. I'm here to listen.
Yep. All right, come on up, please. State your name and address for us.
Matt Miles, 1282 West Oak Grove Road, Montrose.
Thank you. You have anything to add to the staff's report first?
No,
No?
sir.
Okay.
I'm just here to answer questions and listen to the public.
All right. Phoebe, did you have something? No? Okay. Guys? No? Okay. All right. Well then, have a seat, man. Thank you. All right. In that case, we will open up the agenda item for public comment. I assume there's more than one of you that wants to talk tonight? Yes? Show of hands real quick. Okay. Obviously, you can change your mind if you do want to talk later. That's fine. So just a couple things, just to reiterate, for those of you that are coming up here, this agenda, like tonight, we're not voting on anything tonight. So this is purely a time to voice concerns, ask questions, give ideas back to the developer of, what you do, don't like, whatever. And that's what this public comment portion of tonight's agenda item is for. But before that, I do need to read our little thing here. And because there are so many of you, we are going to keep the time pretty strict tonight. So the public comment period of tonight's agenda item is a time when concerned members of the community may publicly voice their concerns on the agenda item being heard by the Planning Commission. If you'd like to comment this evening, please raise your hand and we'll call you up to the podium. Prior to any comments, please state your name and your address for the record. Your comment period will be limited to 3 minutes. I can't remember if this one turns red or flashes. It does something up here. Whenever that happens, we'll ask you to just finish whatever the comment you're making and return to your seat. A spokesperson may also speak for multiple members of the public. So if there's an HOA rep or anything like that, that's fine. But the time limit is going to stay the same. Comments made during this time should be addressed directly to the Planning Commission and pertain to matters specifically related to the agenda item. Please refrain from asking questions of or directing comments to the applicant, city staff, or other members of the public. So as hard as it is, please don't turn around to Mr. Miles and start asking him a bunch of questions during your public comment portion. Please just direct them up here. And same with staff. Like, again, I know it's easy. Scott's really knowledgeable. You want to turn around and ask Scott a question, don't do that, please. It's just for kind of keeping the decorum and how the public meeting is supposed to go. So please be aware that neither the Planning Commission, city staff, nor the applicant are expected to respond or engage in a discussion or debate during your public comment period. Our role is to listen to your comments, concerns, questions, and any evidence that you provide in support or against the agenda item, and then ask relevant questions of the staff and applicant after the public comment period is over. I will allow all interested parties to speak one time until all parties have had the opportunity to speak. Please limit your comments to items that add to the discussion. If someone else has already mentioned the point or points that you wanted to make, please feel free to state your agreement with that support, but be respectful of everyone else's time and refrain from just restating the same issues in repetition. Personal attacks, disagreements, personnel and employment matters, the use of profanity or ethnic, racial, or gender-oriented slurs are prohibited, as is any disorderly conduct which violates state or local law, and those shall not be permitted. Once the public comment period is closed, the Planning Commission will not accept further public comment. And just so you all know, we did get a bunch of public comment that was submitted in writing to the city. Those of you that did that, feel free by all means, if you do want to stand up and still state something else or add to it, you can. But do know that we got some, let's see, comments from Skylar Gray. We've got, this is also Skylar Gray. And then we got the letter, I believe this is from, it looks like an HOA because it's got lots of people's information on there. So, yeah, it just says future neighbors. So I'm not sure if that's an HOA or if that's neighbors on all sides, but those are the public comments that we've already received. And I know we've all reviewed them and the applicant has had access to those as well. So with that, I typically just start over on this side and we move over to this side, front to back. So anybody over here? Sir?
You know, I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Where's the applicant?
That was, Mr. Miles already came up. He already came up.
He's, okay, but he's not. He is.
Yep.
the applicant.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just surprised that he didn't have anything to say.
All right. Just remember, state your name and address for us.
Okay, David Beard, 1911 Otter Pond Circle. Almost two-thirds of the residents of Otter Pond signed a single letter that was included in your sketch packet. The letter encompasses the thoughts and feelings from 54 different homes. I hope you were able to take the time to read their concerns, wishes, and wants. The Leonard Farm subdivision represents just 41% of 1 square mile out of 18.5 square miles for the city. It's only 2.2% of the city's 11,800 acres. The sketch shows the construction of over 1,800 dwellings and an added population of 5,500, which is 25% of the 22,000 people residing in the city now. There's areas surrounding this development that you all know about that are currently either building or have permits approved to build. The density in this small area will represent a large percent of the population for the entire city as a build-out occurs. Perhaps this trend can be reduced by not increasing zoning density on existing parcels just because an adjacent parcel was granted or assigned higher density sometime before. Don't allow any developer to greatly alter the landscape or strain the limits of the existing terrain in order to maximize density and increase profit at the expense of neighboring communities or the environment. Here is one example of what should be considered for this particular development. FEMA rates the arroyo that runs through Leonard Farms as a special flood hazard area. It is ranked AE, which is a high-risk zone, and has a 26% chance of flooding over a 30-year mortgage period. If flood water flow is restricted, the arroyo could be a potential liability to the surrounding area. Is it wise to allow an extremely dense development with such flat terrain to be constructed so close to the arroyo embankments and floodplains? The city should have an up-to-date watershed protection and arroyo management plan. The developer should obtain a floodplain development permit from the appropriate local authority in accordance with the state of Colorado requirements. In my opinion, by having the majority of open space in or directly near the sides of the arroyo, the development contains little usable open space for the residents, thus creating unnecessary risk and destruction to the arroyo and increasing the odds of accidents or injury due to its steep and possibly compromised embankments. I hope you encourage the developer to reduce density in order to locate more open space and pathways within the interior of the development and design a less inviting and wider buffer zone near the arroyo to keep residents safe in the arroyo and damaged. In my opinion, this sketch plan shows more concern for making a buck by constructing dense dwellings, lacks creativity and safety, poor transitions from nearby neighborhoods by constructing only minimum lot sizes required by the zoning designation, and will obstruct views. This land is a blank slate. It can be developed to make it a nice place to raise a family and or enjoy their neighborhood, be more embraced by nearby neighborhoods, and possibly create a high demand for others to live there as well.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize I ran out of time. I was
You
looking
were
down.
close. You were close.
Oh,
5 seconds, bud. All right. Next over here. Yep.
I'm Randy Hedrick. I live at 66460 Ogden Road. And I don't know if anyone knows the fact, Al Roberts used to own that behind us, the south, this whole section here. And he brought a bulldozer in to straighten some of the land out, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in and shut him down. It's considered wetlands, or it was, to the south of us and to the west and south of Heritage Julio there. So there might be a good place for a park, I would think. It's probably 100 yards. They put a ditch in under the field, and they've dug it out a few times trying to drain it, but it doesn't drain. The cattails are still there. So anyway, I was contacted about 6 or 8 months ago by Rebecca Little Owl. She's with the EPA, and I guess they have control over that now. And that was when David Coker started his. And she contacted me, asked me if they had started any movement of dirt behind us, and I told her no. And she said if they dredge or fill, that I should contact her immediately. Don't know that that's my job, and I figured you guys should be aware of that. So I guess that's all I've got to say about it. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Mary Bergner. I live at 2038 Otter Pond Circle. When we bought our house, we knew there was going to be building back there. However, and I totally accept that. It's no problem. I think there needs to be more housing here. But overbuilding is going to create so many problems that you have no idea of. Just go to any city or a big, and you'll see exactly what's going to happen. There is nothing to prevent more crime because it's close built in. People are going to be upset because they can't walk outside and have any privacy at all. The Ogden Road already is overwhelmed, and Woodgate is a disaster. I mean, you can hardly get up and down Woodgate anymore. That roundabout you put in, it's too small. People get stuck in that trying to get into that roundabout all the time. You've got so much infrastructure that will not satisfy the need of what's being planned. You need to have more space, more people, more humanity in that outfit, and it isn't there. It's going to create all kinds of problems, and we don't have the infrastructure. Plus, people move to Montrose because it's a nice town. They like it here. It's easy to get around. We've got everything we need here. What we don't need is an area that's so congested that people say in Brown's Ranch can't even get out because there's so much traffic on the road. I was on Ogden today. I counted 40 cars coming the other way on me, just like that. So we already have a problem. I had Scott out to Otter Pond a couple years ago, showing him the end of Otter Road and where Woodgate intersect. That is extremely dangerous intersection. Even the mailman came up while we were staying there and said, "Are you going to fix this?" Because he almost got hit. So there's all kinds of structural problems. So good luck.
Sir?
Yeah, my name's Skip Houston. I live at 4050 Pioneer Road in Montrose. I just have one thing. I would like for you to consider Woodgate Road, the problems that we have on it, also with the school. You know, when they're going to school and when they pick them up, it's a disaster. And the church on Sundays, I think maybe the church has purchased more ground for a parking area, but the school is a disaster, trying to get up and down Woodgate, and you add a lot of traffic, and then we're gonna have problems. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Skip.
Hi, Dr. Gail Frazetta, 65845 Otter Road. You don't need a traffic study to know that the corner of Otter and Woodgate is horribly dangerous already. I've witnessed accidents at that intersection. Cottonwood is a mess in the morning, along with Sunday mornings with the church. That traffic issue needs to be solved before you allow 1,500 homes down the block from that intersection. And it doesn't appear that it's going to be easily managed nor straightened out. I'm also hearing about the option to donate some land for a park built on an arroyo and not actually get adequate funding for the school district. So to me, that math doesn't add up, that you're going to have 750 homes sitting there, then add a park, and then not necessarily have enough funding to expand Cottonwood, which already has modulars sitting out there as we speak. So either there's going to be infrastructure that you're going to build a school out at Brown's Ranch, but a little bit of plat fees is not going to offset the situation that the school district already has in their hands. I also have concerns that when the land was actually annexed, that there wasn't any input into the zoning that occurred at that time. Like, it would seem to me that why wouldn't you get input from people before you just gave it R3 zoning without input at that point? And it seems to me you leave yourself at a disadvantage by now having to try to take something away that you granted without input. Additionally, I have concerns that historically, Mr. Miles has had a little bit of a predatory real estate development model, essentially renting the land to people who put a modular home on there and then increasing their rent. They don't have the ability to move that modular home, and they're kind of just at his mercy as he increases that rent. So in general, I don't feel like he's been a good steward of our community and folks trying to get real affordable housing and advance in our community with the limited opportunities that we sometimes have. So I would caution you on moving forward with his plan that seems to make him quite a bit of money without really enhancing our community. Thank you.
Just a reminder, guys, please keep the personal attack stuff to a minimum. You can save that for talking to the developer later, okay? All right.
Hello there. My name is Beth Kavanaugh. I live at 4125 Waterfall Drive. And my concern is more of a concern about the land itself and what's going on there. The area that is going to be built up across the street from where I live on Waterfall Drive is a nesting site for sandhill cranes, and they are protected by the state of Colorado. I think you need to look into that and work with the Nature Conservancy to figure out if that's even an area that can be built on, because sandhill cranes are protected. Thank you.
Anybody else on this side? Going once, going twice? All good? Okay. Large section up here, up front. Anybody?
Yeah, my name is John Verbiskar, and I live at 2016 Otter Pond Circle, which is on the west side of this development, okay? And we have one of the smallest houses, in our development, and yet the lot size is adequate enough to let us feel we really have elbow room. When we lived in Cedar Edge, we were told once the town reached a population of 2,000, it could be designated as a city. With that proposed development here, it would be the equivalent of about 2 or more cities just beyond our fence line. Our lot is such that we have a backyard that will face 2 or more backyards, and with the resultant noise and pollution that would entail. Instead of maximizing space, the developer could and should consider the setup of the surrounding areas and achieve a pleasant place to live for future residents. This proposed development is not just so out of touch with its surroundings. Why not develop a pleasant place to live instead of something that is so crowded? It's just too dense. Thank you.
Anybody else in the front row? No? Oh, there you go, ma'am. Yep.
I'm Donna Swalla, and I live at 4101 Waterfall Drive. And my comments will echo comments that you've already heard. My biggest concern, I know progress is going to happen whether we want it to or not, but my biggest concern is the high density that is being considered for this area. And I would also like to echo the sentiments about Otter Road, which is already a nightmare, and Woodgate Road, which is also a nightmare. We have parents parking in the lane that you need to drive in on Woodgate Road now. And if there's oncoming traffic, you're stuck there. And granted, I don't have children that I need to drop off and pick up every day, but it's a problem already. And I would like to reiterate the concerns of high density, concerns of the small lot size, and concerns of the aesthetics of what is being proposed.
Thanks, Donna.
Hello, I'm Bill Abbott, and I live at 65996 Ogden Road. And, well, I don't agree with all the density of it and everything, but I don't know if you guys, what he's going to do about all the water users easement that goes through that place with an underground pipe, the AB lateral. That pipe breaks once a year at least. I have a ditch easement that comes through that place to get to my place. There's a couple other people who have ditch easements, and I think he's going to have to kind of get a hold of us and decide what's going to happen there. And then you guys have all these ponds next to that Dry Cedar Creek. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. I don't know if any of you know anything about farming next to a dang deep creek like that. There are sinkholes all over that. And you're going to put a pond next to that canal or creek, and one of them sinkholes is going to wash out, and you got a lot of washed out dirt going into the creek and then down into the river and stuff like that. And I know we've farmed along the Watsonheiser for 20 years, so I know all about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. All right, next row. Who we got?
Good evening. My name is Christina Files. I live at 1830 Otter Pond Circle, and as a note, I am the Otter Pond HOA president. I state that tonight mostly as an introduction to Matt. He and I have talked on the phone but haven't met face to face, so I thought this was a good opportunity. But then speaking as I want to make that point to facilitate future conversations either between the Planning Commission and Otter Pond or between Mr. Miles and Otter Pond. I also have, as an individual, speaking only as an individual here, I'm an advocate of connected communities. I'm an advocate of having ways to walk or bike between neighborhoods. And I'm a little nervous about the density and the number of people that could be in this new subdivision, but it seems like there are some potential areas, at least one that might be a connection to connect the new development with Otter Pond for walking or biking. And I just wanted to ask that if that goes forward, if we do enable that, that we can have conversations with the city and the Planning Commission about how to handle, that we talked about 1,000 kids potentially some point in this new neighborhood, and having that many people who are walking past our ditches and our pond could become a safety risk. And so I'm hoping that that's something that if we do allow these neighborhoods to connect, that we address, that you guys help us to figure out how to make sure that we stay safe in that area. Thank you.
All right, next, yep, come on up.
I'm Lori Martin, 1821 Otter Pond Circle. My question mostly is regarding the timing of traffic studies versus when the infrastructure is actually expanded. I kind of got the impression from what I believe Scott's had to say was that the traffic studies are done, or the expansions aren't done until after the traffic studies show the need, and that's when the worst congestion happens. Why can't the proposed number of lots be anticipated to increase the traffic studies and the infrastructure be put in first before you've already got traffic nightmares, and then you've got construction creating worse traffic nightmares before the problem's addressed? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lori. Next. Yep.
Hi, my name is Skylar Gray. You guys are probably tired of hearing from me. I live at 2057 Brookway, so this really affects me and my family. The zoning jump from R1B to R3A is too abrupt and violates best practices in land use planning. Our neighborhood was zoned for estate-style homes, dropping a medium-high density development on our border with no buffer, no R2 transition, no infrastructure mitigation practices of the impact on existing residents. That's not compatible planning. It's incompatible pressure. And I was just curious why we weren't notified of the rezoning hearing, and doesn't that deny us our due process? So, thank you.
Thanks. Next? Nope, all right. Sir, yep, come on up.
Thank you. My name is Richard Pozerl, 66580 Otter Road. I was born and raised in Denver, and I've seen firsthand, 50s and 60s, right? Seen firsthand what urban sprawl does to a community. I was fortunate enough to survive my career and get out of Denver. Fortunate enough to find an affordable house. I didn't add to the Montrose. I bought a used home, and I purchased it from a deceased person, so I didn't add to the population or anything. I'm gonna leave you with some questions, but where I live, there are people every day, all day, walking. I watched a family of 4 on Sunday just walk and look at the nature and enjoy the environment. And I hate to see that compromised. I've watched what Dave Coker has built, and he has taken everybody's existing environment into account to build what he's built, and I love that. And I see Otter Pond, and I see the brook. And then if you go out like Miami Road, you see what Jason Byler has built, these beautiful ranch-styled homes that fit, okay? High density does not fit on Otter Road. High density's got to be managed real well. I've seen there's already some planning problems going on. You've shut down Oak Grove and you haven't even finished Ogden Road yet. And I don't understand this overlapping of this constant construction that goes on. So my question to you is, when people apply for this kind of stuff, do you guys actually leave these quarters and go look and go experience what's going to take place and what goes on? And if you don't, there's a problem. You need to go and experience and see and watch what the impact could be on the surrounding communities. This is a surrounded community. It's not isolated out on the east side. It's surrounded by nice dwellings, estates, you know, whatever. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Anybody else on this side? I thought I saw a couple more hands go up. Yep.
Hi, I'm Joe Salette at 2040 Brookway. And there really isn't too much more I can add from the previous conversations, the individuals that came up, because it's really all the same. I think we all share the same concerns about the proximity of the elementary school on Woodgate, the traffic flow on Woodgate, especially the last individual that spoke. I think he summed it up pretty well, being from Denver as well, from the 70s, and how much has changed. And I think people, it's a natural thing for people to want to move away from that if you're not predisposed to that kind of city lifestyle. So you come to Montrose, and Montrose has done a pretty good job since we've been here. You know, the city is pretty attuned, I think, to the needs of citizens, and I think it's grown, you know, fairly responsibly over the years. But I also think, again, coming back to some of the other comments, you're kind of putting a bull in a china shop. You've got the dispersed developments, and Woodgate, as we've already discussed, has become a nightmare. And that school, as already been mentioned, is a real problem. If you add to that traffic, again, it's unimaginable. And again, I understand too that you know, developing is nationwide, it's best and highest use. So it's going to be used. How it's going to be used is a different story. If you start cramming a lot of high density in there, it'll change the complexion dramatically. So I'm really not adding anything more than what's already been stated. I just thought I'd state my position as well. So, thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Is there anywhere, excuse me, is there anyone else on this side of the room? Yep, sir.
Bryson Grave with 2057 Brookway. Don't have much to add, but just maybe looking at a road off of Kinnikin into the subdivision, because it spans out to Kinnikin, but I didn't see any road on the sketch plan coming into the subdivision from Kinnikin, so that's all I got to add. Just helps with the.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening, David White, 1823 Otter Pond Circle. Like everybody else has said, the you know, traffic, you guys are going to address that, but that is a concern to the neighborhood. We have an attractive nuisance with a roughly 15 surface acre lake, and the connectivity issue with this development could potentially create a liability for our homeowners association, and that means for every one of us as residents in Otter Pond. Same thing holds true for the brook. They too have a water feature. The connectivity issue that Christina was speaking about, that there's some historic precedents. Mr. Miles developed Ravencrest subdivision, and N Road, which was in the county. There was a similar discussion about connectivity between N Road and Ravencrest. You may want to go back and look at that discussion. That was many years ago. Wanted to mention, I don't know if Mr. Murphy can answer the question, but years ago the traffic or the transportation plan included extending Otter Road 2 Brown Ranch going east. Is that still, yeah, okay. So there are other ways to get traffic to flow. I, like others, have said progress is inevitable. Mr. Miles has developed very nice subdivisions down to, you know, more affordable housing options. In general, you know, not supporting any kind of modular. You know, we want to see stick-built, and if you consider the buffer between the Broken Otter Pond as an R2 as opposed to the R3, I know the zoning's in place, but that, since this is all preliminary, that can be amended. That's pretty much all I need to say. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? Ma'am, come on.
Good evening. My name is Tina Davis, and I'm a homeowner in Otter Pond, 2034. And I am the mother of 3 children, aged 9, 5, and 1. My 9-year-old is a 3rd grader at Cottonwood Elementary, and my 5-year-old will be attending kindergarten there in the fall. I would like to draw your attention to Cottonwood's inability to absorb a large number of new students and the need for a new elementary school to serve the many students who would move into this neighborhood. The existing infrastructure at Cottonwood was built to accommodate a smaller population, and it is not equipped to handle the rapid increase that would accompany this proposed development. In fact, Cottonwood is not large enough to handle its current population. When my son was in kindergarten, there were 25 students in his class with only 1 teacher. The school recognized this as a problem and hired an additional teacher, but there was no classroom available. So the heroic school staff found space for an overflow kindergarten class by modifying a storage closet. It was transformed into a cheerful mini classroom for its 10 students, but it was barely big enough to accommodate their 5-year-old bodies. There are 26 students in my son's 3rd grade class. The room is overcrowded, and it is difficult for many students to focus. Adding more students to the small space would make learning nearly impossible. To address the growing school population, Cottonwood has already added several modular classrooms to its campus. These temporary classrooms can ease the crowding, but should not be considered a long-term answer. Being isolated from the main school building makes these classrooms less secure. The safety of our children should be our top priority, and we should not be relying on modular classrooms to solve our lack of space. I urge the Commission to consider the impact this housing development will have on our school district, and specifically on Cottonwood Elementary. I ask that the Commission require the Pioneer Ranch Leonard Farms development to include a parcel of land, no less than 10 acres, to be specifically designated as the site of a new elementary school. We have a responsibility to all students, those who are currently living in Montrose and those who will be moving here, to ensure that our schools can continue to provide high-quality education in a safe and supportive environment. I ask that the Planning Commission take this issue seriously and work closely with the landowner and the school district to develop a plan that ensures our schools are prepared for the growth that is coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. All right, anybody else? Yep. We got one over here too, okay.
Justin Musser, 2018 Otter Pond Circle. I wasn't really planning on speaking, and I think most of these folks have really said most of what needs to be said today, but there's a lot of good points brought up here. I think we've got wetland issues, we have wildlife issues, we have irrigation problems, and I think I could add to any of those things my own concerns. One that I haven't heard is that land has water rights associated with it. I'm curious if the Planning Commission plans to interface with water users at all to figure out how that's going to be delivered. That's something that we see consistently as a problem in this area, is our agricultural water system delivering, it isn't set up to deliver water to small subdivisions, let alone large ones like this. Adding to the habitat issue, I think that's an interesting consideration here, and I would urge you to think about that not only in this but in future developments as well. I think habitat connectivity is something that should be a pretty strong consideration as we're approving these types of subdivisions. I'd urge you to look over that letter that was written really well. That was condensed down from probably about 30 pages of comments that were submitted in from other people. We didn't want to duplicate those efforts over and over again. There's some really good points made in there for people that are more familiar with this type of thing than I am, but I think the open space issue is another one that comes to mind for me right off the top of my head. The open space that's shown in the map pretty much exists right along the arroyo, and it's pretty striking to me that that's about the only place that can't be developed, that can't sustain a home safely. And as we're getting these transition zones there are no transition zones between all this different zoning. That's either between the houses that exist there already or the houses that are proposed in the development. Everyone here today, I think it's been pretty clear that nobody's arguing against putting a subdivision in at all. I think we're all very much aware that we need some affordable housing options in this community, but I don't think we need to compromise people's quality of life to put in high density subdivisions that drastically change the character of the community in general and some of these areas that we've developed in previous years. A lot of issues that we could go into here. The traffic, that's another one, been a hot topic tonight. The last time I can remember Otter Pond residents having a discussion about traffic issues in this area, it was indicated that the traffic counts on Woodgate near the Otter Pond subdivision are below threshold levels for that part of Montrose, or I'm not sure what the traffic study actually looks like, but I would say it's pretty drastically overcrowded now from a traffic standpoint, and I think it's between the bad bad intersections and traffic issues that we have now. I think that's another thing to consider strongly. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Hello, my name is Alma Bias. I live at 1841 Otter Pond Circle. And I thank our members that had come over here and give us our input. And traffic, again, is one of our concerns. If, like they said, if you can go and see how the traffic is in Woodgate and Otter Pond Road when the school is over. Our street is full with traffic, with vehicles. And although we have a crossing walk for the kids from school to cross the line, sometimes some of the parents are so desperate, once they get the kids to move away, they make U-turns, sometimes not knowing there might be kids in the back when they're backing up or in the front. My concern is one of these days, we're probably going to have somebody injured because everybody's such in a rush to move out of there because of the traffic that we're really not putting attention what the kids are doing or walking. So my concern is the traffic. So if something can be done, and if we can move the school someplace else, which might be safer for the kids, we'd be much better. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Brian Weatherly, 66159 Otter Road. Everybody here has beautiful homes. The Brooks, Otter Pond, everybody here has beautiful homes. I think the biggest problem that people have is just the high density portion of it. I think if the lot sizes were at least a quarter acre or bigger, I think it would be a lot easier to accept. We want growth, but I think it's just the high density part is too much. I have I don't want it to come first because I'm right next door to all of it. But that's my own personal preference. But, and then biggest thing is with the Elks subdivision down the road, driving to and from down Otter Road with a truck and their construction crews going by, it is a safety issue. I would obviously love to see it addressed before something bad happens and we can't take back somebody's life, right? That's my concerns. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Orth, live at 15 Poplar Street. I don't live in this area where this is going in. I happen to work in this area. And what everybody has talked about is living in this area. What I see is a different perspective. I know these people, I know this community. I've seen a lot of these residents. I've talked to a lot of these residents. It's a friendly neighborhood. It's a great place to walk. It's a great place to get out in nature. But I will tell you straight out, Ogden Road, Woodgate, Otter Road terrify me. I drive these all day long. There's days where I can't do my job because the roads are blocked. They're blocked with the people coming from the schools, blocking the road, blocking access into and out of Otter Pond, across the street into Ridgeline, Woodgate, coming in and out of the church. Those are hazards. There's safety issues. Someone mentioned at Otter Pond where the kids come through, and there's parents who are desperate to get their kids in, get them in a vehicle, and get out of there. They're scary. Those kids are running around all over the place. I cannot imagine what it would be like if you add that many more children to this area. What I would like to see is some serious traffic studies, enforcement of legal driving standards, practices, walkways, pathways, bike lanes, all of these kinds of things I think really need to be taken into serious account, because I see what goes on in Ogden Road, and if there's somebody biking, I feel sorry for them. I really hope they have a helmet, because otherwise I call them an organ donor. Woodgate, morning, afternoon, evening, Woodgate is a nightmare. So when you guys decide to look at things, please make sure to look at them when school is going in, school is coming out, people are coming in for businesses along Woodgate, on Sundays even, when the church is having services. Take a look at when those things are happening, what's really going on in this area, because everything coming up from Otter Road, Ogden Road, and even if you put something out to Kinnikin, all of that traffic is going to be seriously congested in that area. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Yep. You guys are jumping around on me now.
Tom Young, 65871 Otter Road. I just kind of want to bring to attention that I want you to really think about what widening Otter Road is going to do to some of our property values. You know, I'm going to keep it short and I'll leave it at that, but I really it'd be nice if you guys would go look at what's going to happen to some of the homes there when that road gets widened to the limits of the easement. And it's going to decrease our values. So I'm asking you to please consider that.
All right.
Janine Beard, 1911 Otter Pond Circle. I just want to reiterate that 54 Otter Pond residents signed that letter to you guys stating we do not want any connectivity between Otter Pond and the new subdivision. I think the chances of something happening with the pond and all those kids and people coming through would just be too much. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
Hi, my name's Amy Seglin. I live at 66533 Kinnikin. I wanted to address, I've lived there for 19 years. I've loved the habitat behind us. I'm a wildlife biologist. Someone mentioned the cranes. They are starting to nest there. There's a lot of wildlife. We're going to push all that out with these high-density homes. I know that's probably low on everybody's list, but it's something to think about when we live in this community and try and respect the wildlife that shares it with us. I also wanted to address the idea of having the road come out of Kinnikin. That was when the first subdivision, I don't know how many years ago, was first proposed with this kind of spacing. It was disregarded because that is such a dangerous place to come out. I've already had 4 or 5 wrecks off our hill because people take that corner too fast. You can't see. So I would just like to not really consider that coming off Kinnikin because it's such a dangerous area. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
Could I ask a question? When,
You got to come back up to the podium. I think so, but I lost count, so.
what is the timeline for this whole thing to start? Do you have any idea?
We'll get to that as part of our wrapping up of everything for you guys.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Yep. All right, anybody else? Comments, questions? No? Okay. All right, in that case, I'm going to close public comment. We got a lot going on here. I've got at least a page of stuff to get feedback on. But I also drank 4 glasses of water before I got here. I need a 5-minute recess. So we're gonna take a 5-minute recess if everybody's okay with that. We'll be back here in 5 minutes. Don't get too rowdy while we're gone. We don't need to have a motion for that, right, guys? Okay. You guys make a note of when I stop everything. See what time I stopped everything. Hold on. 3 minutes. 2 more minutes. Oh. quick, guys. All right, everybody. If you all could have a seat. Are you serious? Okay. All right, guys. If we could quiet down and everybody take their seats, we'll get the meeting back on track here. All right. So the public comment portion of tonight's agenda has ended. So moving on, anything else that comes up, and if you're like, oh my gosh, I got to ask a question now, please take it up with the staff or the applicant after the meeting, or sometime tomorrow or whatever. What else? I think that's it. Okay, so staff, we're gonna start with some questions and some more insight from you guys, if that's okay, and then we'll bring up the applicant after all that. So, Scott, could you take the lead here, per usual, and the first big one, we'll leave traffic till the last one, but the first big one that we heard a bunch of times is, and there is a lot of water on this parcel, more than we've seen in some of the more recent subdivisions. So not just a matter of the protection of the water. I mean, that is something that if you could elaborate on as far as during the study process, that there are a lot of federal regulations that play into this and things like that. But could you talk a little bit about the protection stuff, but also the engineering, the not just interface with tri-county and city water, but also the water users and how that works?
Certainly, yep, and those are all part of the process. So I'll maybe, go into the 15 water-related things on that front. So, Dry Cedar Creek itself, there's portions of that are likely jurisdictional wetlands. So there's different types of wetlands. Some are jurisdictional with the Army Corps of Engineers. Some are jurisdictional actually with the City of PHE at the state. They had a recent Supreme Court decision that changed the definition of jurisdictional waters that are under the purview of the Army Corps, but there are state regulations that close some of those gaps, and with that the state governs. So, what was a long permitting process with the Army Corps is now a long permitting process with two different agencies, is the end result of that. But anything that falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government or state government, they would have to obviously meet all of the requirements for any disturbances and things of that sort, or development in those areas. Again, I can't, without the studies, at this time, we don't know which of those are jurisdictional. That all comes through with their designs. The most likely, place where we'll be into wetlands is the road crossing of Dry Cedar Creek. It's such a wide creek. you have to, there'll be likely a large box culvert structure and some minor wetland impacts, but there are permitting processes for that, and they work to try and do that in the narrowest part of the creek, which, we've been talking to them about that alignment to minimize those impacts and keep it within legal requirements. Typically, the feds will allow less than 1/10 of an acre of disturbance on those fringe wetlands. So that piece is handled. We don't have city regulations about that outside of, we just defer to the state and federal agencies who do have jurisdiction over that on those items. On the flooding side of things and floodplain, floodway, so Dry Cedar Creek is a mapped floodplain and has a floodplain and a floodway. Difference between the two, floodway is kind of the primary channel for conveyance of a large storm event. It has a 100-year mapped flood, or 100-year return period mapped flood way on that. The floodplain is kind of the overbank storage areas. Within our code, we kind of follow the same regulations that are governed by the CWCB, which is the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and FEMA. And so we're doing all the same regulations as the feds for requirements for development in those areas. Development within the floodplain is permissible, but they have to build their building to a certain height above the floodplain. In this case, a lot of this Dry Cedar Creek, not all of it, but a lot of it through here is incised, and that floodplain is somewhat confined to those overbank areas that they've kind of kept off limits, just because the cost and risk of getting into those fringe areas of the floodplain are, it's just typically not cost effective to do so. That also being said, on the setbacks from the creek itself, so that's one of the things we look at and review to kind of work with them. We just had one of these on Cedar Creek subdivision where, we take it as far as we'll actually have them stake their lot boundaries and walk the entire alignments with them to make sure that we're in agreement with it's ultimately their engineer's call, but make sure that we're in agreement with their engineer's assessment of sufficient setback. Mostly from an erosional and property protection standpoint, those creeks are pretty erosive and you get lateral retreat over time. They're very dynamic systems, so you want to make sure that you're far enough away so when they do their thing over the decades that it's not doesn't end up threatening people's lots or structures. So that's something that is closely looked at through that design process to make sure that's not an issue. And then same thing with those ponds and things. That's stuff we look at. It's very legitimate concern about saturating those areas and increasing or decreasing the slope stability along there. That's part of the design considerations we work with them on as well. As far as the irrigation water, so a lot of those ditches through there either have descriptive or prescriptive easements. And so those protections provide downstream water users that you can't really modify depending on how the easements are written. But generally, the overarching principle is, if water is conveyed through your parcel, you can't block it. You can't take it for your own. You can't block their rights. They have a right to come across your property to do that. There's 20 different nuances to all of that in the law and things, but generally speaking, they couldn't just go and block off somebody's irrigation water. They would have to accommodate that in their design. That's part of our review. All of the reviews also go through the Bureau of Reclamation. So they're one of the reviewers of the subdivision plans, which the Bureau of Reclamation typically owns a lot of the facilities for the Uncompahgre project. The Uncompahgre Valley Water Users operates the systems. So they're both involved through the design review process, and we ensure that their designers are not ignoring any of those things that need to be accommodated in the design, and coordinating with the right people as far as the users or the water users, Uncompahgre Valley water users, if modifications are needed to those systems to make sure that delivery can be maintained. And does that cover all the water ones? Any other water questions?
Just a little bit about the wildlife part of that.
Yeah, so similarly, we don't have any city core regulations on, we do along the Uncompahgre River as far as a setback and buffer corridor for kind of a wildlife and riparian area. So generally, a lot of their development would default to federal regulations. So if there's federally designated sensitive habitat, if they do anything that has wetland permits, typically has a nexus to do a lot of the ecological studies, the NEPA process and all that they could be maybe triggered on these projects. Besides that, we also, and these meetings are excellent because it's important for them just to kind of understand what those sensitive areas are, and ideally we encourage avoiding those where possible. just because they're, and a lot of times, difficult to replace, or, very unique. So there's no hard and fast rules on what we can prohibit them to do. Fortunately, with this one, with Dry Cedar Creek and how broad and wide it is and the setbacks that'll be required from it, it does end up preserving that corridor really well. Naturally, a lot of places we see, if it's farmable, it's developable. And so a lot of places that have been farmed and graded and manipulated over the years, a lot of times turn into the housing in a lot of the areas that can't. Farmers are really savvy people. If they couldn't farm it, you probably can't build on it. So, you see a lot of those development patterns follow the farming, that's been laid out hundreds of years ago, but, or over 100 years ago. So there's no, silver bullet answer to that one, but it is something that we try and work with them on.
Yeah, no. Well, actually, I do have a question, because you kind of touched on it as far as protection of the sandhill cranes, which is not the water, but you kind of talked about animals. I mean, are they protected, and what happens, what do we do about that?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes into, the federal regulations on endangered species and federally designated critical habitat for those species. And so a lot of that, if those federal regulations apply, and I don't know if they do in this case or not, we worked a lot with the yellow-billed cuckoo on some of the river stuff. If there's designated habitat, they have to, it's typically around endangered species. But I'm not familiar at this stage with if there are any designations on any of these land as critical habitat, which then brings in federal Fish and Wildlife Service and things on those types of issues. So don't know yet.
Just one thing, somebody referred to wetlands. So how does that affect this property?
So same, like I mentioned earlier, so depending on the type of wetland, there's, they're either non-jurisdictional at the state and federal level, jurisdictional at a state level, or jurisdictional at a federal level. So depending on the type of wetland, where it's at, how it's connected to the waterway, a lot of those fall under the purview of those different agencies. There's also a lot of exemptions for irrigation. So there's a lot of wetlands out there. We've been dealing with some of these on some city projects recently where the wetlands are solely a product of, fringe along a ditch that's now being piped. In a lot of those cases, those are exempt because you can imagine there's a lot of farming that would be precluded if those definitions held. So there are exceptions also within all those state and federal regs.
So what's the timeline of us knowing more about that in the future with the process?
So that's part of their civil design. If there's known issues that are areas that are need to be delineated, that are proposed to be disturbed, we would ask them to coordinate with the feds and then follow up to ensure that they're going through that federal process. We can't like hold up our approvals on it typically, but it's on them to work and follow the law for those with those federal pieces. And everybody's, typically if they're not, people are tattletaling and making the feds aware. So it happens pretty naturally on all these projects.
So all this open space around this creek, and you've talked about that creeks do move over time. So one of our citizens talked about that if one of these retention ponds did fall away into the creek, in the long-term situation, let's just say that's 10 years from now, maybe the whole neighborhood's not done. Really, who's responsible to rebuild that situation? Is that a city responsibility, or is that back to the builder, or is that the HOA?
That would fall, depending on where they are in the development process, and who has control of the HOA. So a lot of times the HOAs will still stay in the developer's control until they hit at least 50% build out. But ultimately, all those are set up so the ponds are operated and maintained by the HOA, which for the early stages of, usually the first decade or so, that is the developer in a lot of cases, or they have majority control. Wouldn't fall to the city. They would have to replace it and maintain that functionality. So in a lot of cases like that, it'd be, you'd be doing some stream armoring and reconstruction, which folds in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and all of that for that type of work. But under our discharge permit with the state, which is our MS4, it's our municipal discharge permit, we have to inspect those on an annual basis, ensure they're fully operational, and if they aren't, we have to work through with the owner, which in this case would be the HOA, to make sure that they are brought up to snuff if they're ever deficient. So that keeps that protection there to make sure that that water quality and water quantity is detained as designed and stays that way in perpetuity. And then ultimately, any repairs or maintenance would fall on the HOA/developer.
Sorry. Any other water stuff? No? Okay. Like I said, I'm going to leave traffic till the last one. So the next one I've got is, Scott, could you talk about the city's connection plans, mainly through the bike path walking network, and how this fits into that, or what this would require as part of this build-out to make those connections?
Yep, so the exact connections aren't known yet. That will get worked out through their design and will be heavily dependent on their phasing. So if they start at the top end versus starting at the bottom end, that'll look different as far as making meaningful connections to those neighborhoods and not having them isolated. So I can't say definitively exactly what that'll look like, but that is something we take into consideration in their phasing plan ultimately. If you remember, we just, a couple years ago was like Woods Crossing North, and when they got to a point where they got past the halfway point and were no longer connected to the street network on Hill Street, then they needed to connect the sidewalks so they could go west. And so, when you see in that filing plan, you'll see, this phase, once you get to this point, will include the off-site connection to make sure that, you have continuous meaningful connections throughout construction. And that heavily plays into their phasing plan too, to make sure that, make it as cost-effective for them as possible to ensure that as they're going, they're not starting in an isolated area that doesn't have options for connectivity, because obviously all the amenities are right there on Woodgate. You got all the shopping amenities, the rec center, all those things. Those are important connections for the neighborhood.
And then is the city, I guess, either kind of making the, what am I looking for? Or encouraging the cooperation, or does the city actually kind of mandate the cooperation between when we have developments that are next to each other simultaneously being developed? Neither one of them are in the stage where, they need to be connected yet, but they do need to be connected at some point through that kind of system.
Where possible.
How does that work?
Yeah, so the best practice.
We don't bike trails to nowhere, or
So-
sidewalks to nowhere.
So the best practice in a perfect world is, everything's set up so that those connections are possible in the most efficient way possible. If we can get to the system here, obviously all public rights of way are available for walking. So, to the point, there is things that can be done to make sure that nuisances and stuff are made safe, but generally, we can't say, oh, you can't go walk in this neighborhood. People can do that. It's a public amenity. But, specific to some of the neighborhoods along here, there's some places where connections are possible, either vehicular or pedestrian. There's some places they're not, due to land restrictions or buffer strips that exist in between. So those are all things that get taken into consideration of the phasing and how to make those meaningful connections. I don't have a hard answer exactly how those are laid out yet, because they just haven't gotten into that level of detail on their design. But yeah, in some cases, even if we wanted a connection, if the land doesn't exist, the only option is either to purchase some or seek eminent domain, which, my tenure, haven't done that yet. Yeah. So
Good.
Don't plan to start.
Okay, anybody else on that thing, connection stuff at all? Bike trails, that kind of thing? Okay. Well, on my list, I think that's all the stuff that isn't traffic, so.
I guess to further answer on connections too, so the comp plan, there was a question about Otter Road. The comp plan, Otter Road is a main east-west minor arterial. Eventually, as development marches towards the east, is planned to continue up to Sunshine Road, Brown Ranch, and actually into Brown Ranch as a minor arterial. So that, from a traffic standpoint, that's mostly for the purposes of draining traffic from Brown Ranch itself. There's not a lot of trip generation that would drive this neighborhood back towards the east. If someone's coming in or through, or you have someone coming down Bridges Drive, they're either destined for the commercial centers and would come onto Ogden, or if they're destined for anything south of town, they would likely come out on Otter. And that, brings in improvements to the intersections of Otter and Woodgate, signal a long-term plan for Otter at the highway as a signal there as well. All those things come into play with that when you hit those thresholds.
All right. Yeah, so let's start with the, let's actually just talk about the school thing again. as, you know, as a city entity here, the planning commission has no bearing on what the school district decides to do. I mean, as a parent in Cottonwood, like, I know full well the issue that's there. But could you just talk a little bit more about like how engaged the city gets, or I don't know if that's more you guys, Jace, if you want to talk about it, kind of how that works, you know, at what point, you know, are we looking at, you know, maybe increasing the amount that you require in a plat, like what, and maybe talk about that a little bit. William talked about the plat note that gets added, and it's either through building permits, you know, per house, or it's a flat out, here's a chunk of, you know, here's a chunk of land. Like what guides that, and what is the size of land, and how does that work?
Yeah, generally it's a discussion that's had pretty early on with the school district about whether land is to be dedicated directly to the school or it's just a fee in lieu of land dedication. That plat note indicates if it is a plat note, if it's a fee in lieu of, that's $679 per unit. So it doesn't sound like a lot for a single unit. When you talk about 1,500 units, you're talking about $1.1 million. So sizable when you talk about that number of units. It really comes down to the school district. We don't really have authority of what they decide to do if they want to take the land. The bigger issue when it comes to schools and school construction is the cost of the actual school itself. As you see with bonds that are going on that are trying to be passed throughout multiple jurisdictions, that's generally the bigger issue. One thing to bring up that came to our attention is Brown Ranch, so just adjacent by about a mile here, to, probably not even a mile to the east. Back in 2008, there was actually land dedicated for the school district, to the school district. The school district sold that land recently. So it kind of reflects, you know, it's a bigger discussion with the school districts and us. We do have those discussions, but it's also at the school district board and how they see their growth and where they see their growth, and then how they see their boundaries changing over time. So I think that discussion happens kind of at the higher level from the school board and the school district themselves, but we certainly do keep them in the loop continuously when it comes to growth. So I want to make that very clear, but we don't have the ultimate authority or decision-making power to decide what they will do.
Is it something where, you know, something like this comes before a planning commission, the planning staff, and, you know, at what, like, is there a threshold, or is it just every time that there's an application, like, is it a submittal to the school district that, hey, this is being submitted, give us your thoughts, or is it that we know you guys have a, hey, if we know there's going to be whatever, 5,000 units in this part of town in the next 10 years, we know that that's going to trigger, as a school district, we're going to have a bond measure or something. How's that, can you just talk a little bit from our side, from the city side, how that works?
Sure. Typically, we don't see a development of this scale, right? So most of the time we see smaller subdivisions of 100 units. So you don't see that. Generally, what the school district would say is that increase wouldn't necessitate any need for any school land dedication or a school in that particular location. I think what's brought up today is certainly a valid point, is maybe there is discussion now that should be had at the school district, kind of higher level school district board. Is this appropriate for a site? Again, when we talk about absorption and construction, we're looking at probably 3 decades, maybe 4, and I'll look to Mr. Miles to see what his actual phasing plan and timeline is. So it's certainly not an overnight thing, but with this in particular, this one will seek more school input from when that preliminary comes in. Early on, we've looped them in, but early on in the sketch plan is generally very early because so many things change. But this is a large-scale development. We certainly recognize that from the planning standpoint, and we will absolutely engage with the school district to see how and what is best for them to move forward with.
And I'll just add in as well, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, you know, we do meet with the school district. I think we're averaging about once a year, identifying areas for future, where we anticipate future residential growth. They are working constantly on their end in determining how that will affect where they adjust the school district boundaries for where students are zoned to certain schools. And certainly not just us, they also work with the county. Pretty sure they work with the town of Olathe as well. So yes, we do have those discussions.
William, can you answer or address Dr. Frazetta's question associated with school money is school money, park money is park money. The two shall not merge, go to one pocket or the other. They are separate pools of money. Is that correct?
Yes, so the parks fee, if we get parks fee in lieu of money, that goes directly to the city. Any school district money, that impact fee, that $679 per unit, that goes directly to the school district. So very separate pots of money go to separate entities as well.
Thank you.
All right, and to bridge the, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to just cover a couple things. That there is
School related?
No.
Okay, hold on. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Yeah, is it?
Wait, hang on just one
Is
second.
it school related? Okay.
So I have a quick question on the impact fee with schools. And District, or Mesa County, District 51, just increased their impact fees. Have ours been increased recently?
I don't believe so. I'm looking around. I don't believe so. So with Mesa County, and I have worked for the city of Grand Junction, so I can kind of speak to their impact fees as well. I believe that that impact fee for schools actually capped out several years ago. So I don't know that that is a fee that was increased. I know that they looked at transportation impact fees, police and fire fees, and some other impact fees. I do believe they capped out at their school impact fee. I don't know that we've seen an increase, and we may have capped out on ours. Good question that we can look into, though.
Yeah, I just wonder on the $679 per unit that's paid for by the developer, if that's been happening for the last 10 years, or if that's something that should go up with the cost of living as the developer.
We'll dig in more. I'm guessing it's been at least, I'll look to Scott, but probably since he's been here.
Yeah, I'm not aware of an increase recently, and I can't, actually, admittedly don't know if we set that or if they set that, the history there, but.
Typically, the school district is the one who does set that. We discuss with them, of course, but they typically set that, and I'm not aware of any changes in any
Next time you
past.
meet with the school district, will you put that on the question to be asked for them?
Absolutely.
Because $679 per unit is a drop in the bucket for what's going to be needed for these kiddos.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep, I know, just for reference, I believe the Grand Junction school impact fee was about $900 per unit, if I'm not mistaken.
School related?
Yes.
Okay.
When I drive down Woodgate, I only go as far as the rec center or making a right and going towards Target. But the one or two times that I've gone farther down, I'm amazed about how bad that traffic is. It is really horrible. If they have complaints
stealing my
about
thunder.
it or really want to take it up, the citizens, they should go to the school board, would be the place to address these issues. Am I correct on what I'm hearing?
I can speak a little to that, and there's a long history over there. It's really both. I mean, between the city making sure streets are designed right to try and help alleviate any of those problems, getting the schools designed right, and police enforcement as well. You've probably all seen some pretty boneheaded stuff out there during drop-off and pickup that don't help with the safety issues. Good examples of the system where it works, so like, the new Columbine Middle School, designed to have a lot of deep storage. You have less demand, obviously, with middle schoolers, but designed to have a lot of deep storage on their site, so you get a lot of storage on site, so it doesn't spill into the right-of-way. That's a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. A lot of these schools were built, they didn't have the funding and or space to do that, and so we're kind of left to try and make lemons out of lemonade and make it as safe as possible. And a lot of that, unfortunately, comes down to enforcement too, to try and get rid of some of the bad behavior. That all being said, a lot of times roads are not designed for the school pickup rush hour. It is ideally the school district's able to do things to mitigate that. We work together with them, so we've worked with Cottonwood and looked at, 5 or 6 different kind of incantations of their parking lot to try and improve the situation, improve the flow, and everything was a compromise of safety. Kind of what they have now, even though it's weird, it's about as safe as it can be in the space that they do have. And so it's just a reality of schools in residential areas. Most, all of them have it. I have to battle it a couple times a week as well. And, but we don't, to design for that half an hour a day, ish, plus or minus, sometimes it spills more than that, typically is not a cost-effective, use of infrastructure to then put that onto the city's, city's taxpayers for, just that frontage there. So it's just kind of an unfortunate thing, and try and do the best they can with the space and resources everyone has.
All right, Delphine, did you have other stuff that was not traffic?
Yeah, I just want a couple of reminders. This subdivision has no plan of having modulars with a lot rent. Am I correct? That's something that I would like to to address. The current plan does not have modulars with a lot rent model.
As presented, they are planned to be individually conveyable properties, and so each individual property would be able to be sold.
Great. Thank you.
And as far as modular goes, good question. I'd say directed towards the developer themselves. So modular construction isn't allowed use within the zone district. Manufactured homes would not be in this zone district, but modular would. So good question for the developer.
And then furthermore, I only have been on the Planning Commission for about a couple of years. So if you can give me a little bit of history of the zoning, because at this time I believe the zoning is in place and it's not something that we're deciding on today, even though we heard a lot of concern about the zoning. So the zoning is in place and used by right as of today. Can you clarify so everybody can hear?
That's correct. So the majority of this property was annexed as part of the Pioneer Ranch annexation. That was done in 2008. None of the current staff was here at the time. None of the current Planning Commission was here at the time. So, whether or not we agree with it, that is what is in place. Part of it was also annexed and zoned in 2024. That's a portion of the subdivision. But again, that decision has been made and the zoning is in place. So, again, that's what we have to work with at this time.
And so who made the 2024 zoning decision?
That was ultimately City Council.
So, and that does not come before Planning Commission anymore,
It
correct?
did. It did come
It did
before
come
Planning
before us?
Commission. Yes.
Yep.
What were we thinking?
What?
What we were thinking is nobody showed up.
Nobody from the public showed up.
No,
To-
here's
to
the
be fair-
reality,
to be
is we
fair.
had a public meeting and nobody was here. It was an empty room, and I was shocked that nobody was
We
here.
were all pretty shocked, I think.
Yeah.
And so on that note, because Skylar, you mentioned it, and you mentioned it in your written stuff that you sent to us, and tonight, back in, I don't know, 2018, is that how long we've been here, Chad? I think the staff used to put a slide in the presentation, and it was just here's the property, here's the 100-foot boundary around that property. Really, a development this large, I would expect people from all over Montrose to be here, whether you live next to the property or not. But the reality of the city resources, they pick a number, maybe 100 feet is arbitrary, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's changed from 100 feet, William, but.
300.
300 feet, okay, so 300 feet. If your property touches that 300-foot little boundary, then you should have been notified for any planning commission stuff, whether it was this or anything else. And if you weren't, and you think that you fall in that 300 feet, then by all means, please reach out to the planning staff and find out why you weren't notified. Could you tell folks how you notify them? Is it mail? Is it email? What is it?
Yeah, so there's three methods. We do place an advertisement in the local newspaper. We do mail letters to all property owners within 300 feet, specifically of the property that the hearing is about. And then we also post a sign physically on the property. And that's all done 15 days prior to the hearing.
Okay.
And one thing to mention about the annexation from 2024 and the zoning of that property, so that's the northeast portion of this development. So with that said, this is not the portion that's adjacent to Otter Pond. This is not the portion that's adjacent to Brook, and hence the reason that the notification wasn't there. That was zoned R3A, I believe. Same zoning as basically what the 2008 zoning designation was for the entirety of it. So good thing to keep in mind here as well.
Yep. And changes to that notification procedure would be a staff decision? If the staff decided from, moving forward, if there's 500 feet or to do it more days in advance or something, is that a
It's
administrative
ultimately
decision?
ultimately in the municipal code, so it would require a code update.
Okay, so folks, if you don't like it the way it is, go to city council and get a code update, and maybe that would alleviate some of those issues.
Wait, can I add something to that? If you choose to go to city council and change that municipal code, ask for a bigger sign. I mean, those signs are so small that you can't even actually appreciate them.
I can appreciate that comment. I've heard this every jurisdiction I've been at. We increased the signs actually when I first came here to Montrose, and they're the biggest signs I've ever seen at any jurisdiction, but it's a topic that comes up everywhere, and it is one of those things that is difficult. So one thing we're working on, this for the public's knowledge too, is a better public portal so people can actually see active projects live, and the documentation that goes along with those. We kind of have an antiquated permitting software and system at the moment, but we are upgrading that, and hopefully with that, probably in about 6 to 9 months from now, we'll have something more dialed in that's a better public feature that we can route the public to. So that's probably going to be the best mechanism. We talk about size of sign, we talk about number of feet for mailers. It is a constant discussion that's brought up in every jurisdiction, I can promise you that. But we're doing our best here and trying to get better each day.
I just really appreciate that. I just want to say also, for me, it's important to kind of show the background, as the 2024 was a different side of this subdivision, that the R3A has been in place for a while, that it's not something that, other than, true safety, public safety, that we really have to understand the position that we're in here and what calls we can and cannot make. And so I think I really appreciate you walking us through kind of the past a little bit, because it's beyond, obviously, 2008. I wasn't here, and none of us here on staff were either. So it's good to know the history and where this is coming from also. I hope this helps everyone understand the process. But yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Go ahead, Phoebe.
All right, so Scott, I understand that you can't change a road or improve a road until it warrants being changed or improved. But there's a very real safety issue with the people that walk just recreationally up and down Otter Road. And they do that all the time. You don't have to live out there to know that that's, I'm all for physical fitness. So, it seems like at some point could we as a planning commission at phase 2, like hypothetically, ask them to put in sidewalks on Otter Road before they start construction, so to speak?
I would default to the city attorney about the legality of forcing off-site improvements on a subdivision. I guess for my world, and I'll let Chris speak, but from ours, if that's not their primary connection route, a lot of that neighborhood, if they give them a safe route up through a different direction into the core amenities, it would be a pretty tall nexus for us to say, hey, this is our chance to get Otter fixed. It's a community need. It's a rural road, and that's how a lot of cities build. These are old farm-to-market roads that weren't built for pedestrian facilities, but people are using them that way because there's subdivisions even existing, regardless of density. Because you have subdivisions along there that exist today, they're now, they didn't widen Otter when it came or put sidewalks on Otter. And so that's why we try and make sure that what does go in now has safe connections and connectivity. And we can very defendably require that through our code. But generally to tie an off-site thing that they may not necessarily be relying on, if the traffic studies can demonstrate safety for the vehicles and they have a safe pedestrian pathway elsewhere, it would be, in my opinion, a pretty tough order to force that onto the development, but I'd maybe default to Chris too.
Yeah, so I'd have to actually look at the annexation agreement and what's gone on there. So the answer is I don't know. Also, you know, if you're anything for Otter Road that is not abutting any of their property, obviously we would not be able to force them to do that because they don't own that property. So again, I would have to see the annexation agreement. I don't have it up right now, so I couldn't give you a definitive answer.
I think there is also a good reminder that this doesn't happen overnight. The number is scary. You know, we look at the plat and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have this many houses tomorrow in my backyard. It's not gonna happen overnight. It's all based on supply and demand. And so some of our development have taken decades. Some have taken a couple of years. Some have taken 2 decades. And some never happened. They came up here in front of us and never happened. So just also keep that in mind, that these things just take supply and demand, and if they are happening, there is a demand in our community and a need for it in our community. And so they take time, and so it's not overnight that you're gonna have 1,000 people going on Otter Road overnight. Am I right assuming that?
Yeah, fair statement, yep.
So, Jace, William, could you guys talk a little bit about so this project is going through the subdivision process. It is not going through the plan development process.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so my understanding, it's been a minute since we've done a PD of any size, so the big difference here is that at this time, the application is not requesting any deviation from what the zoning in that whole parcel allows.
That's correct. And if the applicant did end up deciding to move forward with the PD, then that would also require, the process is the same as the subdivision, so it would also require sketch plan, preliminary plan development, and final plan development. But at this time, the applicant has not requested a PD.
Okay, so then within the whole parcel, I don't know if we can flip this back to the one that has the zoning on it. And kind of match that up with what, like the plan that we've seen. Does it matter, like where that R4 section is down in the south for the way that the subdivision has been presented?
Yeah, so that there is a meets and bounds legal description of where the zoning districts are on the current Pioneer Ranch Edition zoning map. Obviously, the zoning determines what building type and density can be built on that portion of the property. And so it's not just a miasma of several different zoning districts that we don't exactly know.
So just because there's R4 in there, we can't just do R4 density through the whole entire subdivision?
Correct. The R4 density could only exist within the portion of the property that is zoned R4.
Okay.
Unless, in theory, they apply to rezone, which of course any property owner does have the right to apply to rezone, but that would be, require another public hearing as well as approval by the Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay.
But at this time, we have not received any kind of rezone application.
Okay, perfect. That helps with kind of just understanding the difference there. I've got a question about how you guys have used in relation to this particular project. So the city did a housing needs study fairly recently. And I assume that just like the comprehensive plan, from your perspective as staff, it's a guiding document. But could you talk a little bit about, how much, how much pushback can you, like, how much guiding is there versus, yeah, it's nice to have, we have it, but if the developer has the land, use by right, can, you know, if he's checking all the boxes, how much do we point out the needs assessment and say, does this development meet the needs? And I'm not saying that this one doesn't meet the needs. You know, it looks like there's going to be tons of different types of housing available in this development, which is one of the biggest things that we learned in that housing needs assessment. But could you just talk a little bit about that, how that plays in here?
Yeah, really the housing needs assessments, it's a guiding document, right? And it's not a policy document. The code, for subdivisions, the code is really the driving factor, kind of alongside the comprehensive plan to support it. The housing needs assessment is similar in that support role. So if it's a use by right, if there's valid reasons to turn it down, I think that you certainly could vote no, but subdivisions are a bit more difficult than, say, a rezone in that sense, generally speaking, because subdivisions have very particular things, and if they're met, and you really have to make sure that you prove that they are not met to vote it down. So that's the difference. But circling back to the housing needs assessment in general, just to give a little background, I believe that document reflects that over the next 20 years, we need about 210 homes or housing units per year to be constructed to keep up with population growth. So if we're talking, you know, a total of 1,600 units just within this subdivision, you can imagine that will take decades because there's other subdivisions that are being built out, of course. So kind of the supply and demand component. The housing needs assessment also kind of goes into more demographic information specific to what does our growth truly look like. We have a high population of kind of more senior citizens, a lower population of young adults. So we are actually at a negative growth rate in terms of natural growth because we have more deaths than births. So we're seeing more in-migration from other states. So that just a little bit of background as far as that growth dynamic, but it is just a guiding document, not a policy document that helps us when developments come in, when we're looking at housing diversity and housing stock. So.
Okay. And then similarly, just to put you on the spot again, Jace, before we likely switch back to Scott, and hopefully he's got all his traffic stuff ready to go. So similarly, you know, the comp plan is pretty clear on kind of the vision for Montrose. And one of those things is, you know, maintaining the rural character of the city, right? That being said, the city is an urban, it is more urban than the surrounding county areas, right? Like, it might not be Denver, but it is an urban downtown. But if you guys are using the comp plan as a guiding document, and we need to be using it as one as well versus a policy document, what does stop one of the gentlemen brought up what I like to call the Morrisonization of Montrose. If you've driven through Morrison on your way to Denver, it is nonstop housing with zero amenities from the foothills until you get to Santa Fe. Like, it's all houses all the time. And I don't think it's in the comp plan, like in keeping with the comp plan, to see houses from the river to the Black Canyon. So how do we reconcile that as far as what discussions you have with the developer between now and the plat, basically, to stop that, not necessarily in this particular instance, but just moving forward, because we're starting to fill in that gap there of the only rural bits of downtown or the city boundaries that are left.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Generally, you know, when you see higher density, when we talk with the county, we really want to focus density within the city and bring and drive density within the city, especially where it's well served by the appropriate infrastructure. So that's the goal when working with the county, is to kind of keep that and keep the county more rural and frankly, not annex if we don't need to annex. So we have good conversations with them. As far as working with the developer on large-scale developments like this, it's making sure that there is city amenities and added amenities overall. So that's when when this development comes into play. That's why we talk about dedication of a city park. We don't really like to do that as much anymore because the maintenance obligations are so high for dedicated city parks, but we recognize this is a critical area that is in need of a city park. So it's kind of contributing factors like that. And again, we all moved to Montrose because we like the rural nature of it. I'm the same. I think the same as that as well. But it's, you know, how can you kind of get pockets of density? How can you disperse density out a bit? How can you get housing diversity? And I think this development reflects that. Is it a lot of units? Absolutely. When you look at the grand scheme of things, as you look at the phases and the timeline, I think it's a little less scary to view. But overall, I understand the issues at hand here. But we work with the developer to make sure that it does kind of keep with that continued character of Montrose while adapting housing types as needed for affordability and everything else, so.
Thank you, Jace.
Talking about phasing, can you go to the page where we see the phases? And then how accurate is this in the sense that this can change at any time, correct? And then how do we know which one is the first one? How do we know where it's gonna start? Like, for a public perception, right, I would want to know which side is going to get started, and...
Could you, actually, William, could you, because it's hard to see on here, could you just identify like the first one or two phases for us? Just tell us which ones they are, as it's been presented right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's split across two slides, I think, but the phase one is the kind of pink area at the bottom, or at the south of here, which is immediately along Otter Road, and then the northern portion, also in pink, on the part of the subdivision south of Otter Road, and then phase two is the kind of purplish area immediately north of that.
So right
again,
around, basically on either side of Otter, that's kind of the first focus.
Correct, at least at this time. This is, at the end of the day, again, just a sketch plan, so things can certainly change as the developer moves forward, as the kind of engineering and traffic studies and all of that indicate where it might be appropriate, more appropriate to kind of do that phasing.
And we would see that initial kind of more concrete plan at the preliminary plat as far as that phasing?
Correct. Okay. And I know it's hard to see in these white squares. Unfortunately, just being such a large area, everything has to be a little bit condensed, but as I said, they are all available in tonight's public meetings portal as PDFs, which are full size, much easier to see there.
Okay, thanks, William. Okay, anybody else have any other stuff for the staff that is not traffic related?
Maybe clarify a couple things or have staff comment. I think density came up a few times to folks, and you all touched on it a little bit about the city staff and the planning commission's ability or not to impact that density going forward. So maybe just review what it means to say that if it is, if the density as it's laid out in this sketch plan is a use by right, sort of what that means, clarify, which I take to be true, that city staff nor the planning commission can initiate any rezone. That would have to be something an applicant would do of their own volition. And then maybe Jace also, in that line, you touched on the sense of, well, down the line, maybe the density would change if certain conditions are met, maybe comment, just to comment in what ways either the city staff or the city planning commission would have the ability to lower that density or not going forward.
Yeah, so as I said, the density is determined by the underlying zoning. The zoning is in place. There are certain development rights and use types, minimum lot sizes associated with all zoning districts within the city. As kind of Jace mentioned before, we have to review a code specific to subdivisions to identify whether or not that proposed subdivision does meet code at the end of the day. That being said, again, there are going to be required in the developer to submit a whole bunch of traffic studies, engineering studies, everything like that. If those identify that the subdivision is not possible at that density, then the applicant would need to revise their plan in order to reduce the density so that the existing infrastructure or whatever infrastructure is being proposed is suitable to service that subdivision. Again, we don't know that answer yet. We don't have, a formal traffic study or, all those utility plans in front of us. But, again, at the end of the day, if that is demonstrable that the subdivision can't be served, then that would inherently require the developer to reduce that, the overall number of units.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, spot on. If it's a use by right, it's kind of dictated in the code what those minimum lot sizes are, what that maximum density threshold is, those components, so they have to hit those criteria. We also encourage open space and other things when we can. Can we require it all the time? No, but we can certainly encourage it to try to minimize impacts to neighboring properties, encourage connectivity where possible, kind of standard planning practices that you see everywhere. But so can we dictate the density lower? No, theoretically, but we certainly can encourage components to be added to a plan as we go through that process to kind of help drive the end product.
And it's pretty common as we get into not just traffic studies, but water sequencing and things of that sort to get fire protection, that the phasing plan does change depending on what it can support. Like in this case, maybe they need to start at the north end instead of the south end because Ogden can handle it, but Otter can't. I'm not saying that's the case, but for example, those things definitely happen throughout the design process as they get deeper.
So, yeah, so really, from a planning commission point of view, use by right can be the 3 words you hate the most, but that's the way it is. And let me just, I'm now pinballing, but I think it was Marion who's one of our first speakers, and I will say, you guys, thanks for coming and showing up and talking. I know that's hard, so thanks for doing that. But Marion said she was on Ogden Road today and she counted 40 cars, and I think what we have to remember now is that Oak Grove is closed. So Ogden Road is going to be a lot more traffic-y, if that's the word. So we have to be cognizant of that. It's gonna be a lot busier on Ogden till that roundabout. And there's another three word that we can love or hate. But yeah, when that opens, that'll help Ogden Road a lot. Yeah.
All right, we ready to move on to traffic? Yeah? Well, kinda. So, Scott, just to keep focus a little bit on the traffic conversation, because we don't have any plans right now, let's work with the fact that as we've been presented the sketch plan, and that way maybe, your feedback, your comments might get the public here something to go back to the developer with in between now and the next phase if they either like or don't like what you kind of talk about here. So if the first phase is going to be that phase right now that kind of on either side of Otter, just looking at that as we've been presented it, does that density do anything for that stretch of Otter from there to Woodgate? Does it mean that anything happens to it different from now?
I hate to keep saying it, but it'll depend on the traffic study. So they will have to demonstrate what can be supported safely, comparing to established standards for capacity of the roadway and geometry of the roadway and the intersections that it would feed into. And then that may drive either, if it can't support it, they either need to reduce their density to what can be supported, or if they want to, they can do offsite improvements. We typically don't require those. Back in the day when when development and construction costs were a lot more favorable, is a different animal. But typically, the city uses that information to understand when those improvements are required and fold that into our capital plan. It's not just this neighborhood that goes down Otter and Woodgate. Those are amenities that are used by the community at large, and we try and fold those into our understand when to fold those into our master capital plans to make sure that we're staying ahead of development as best we can. So that would all come with the results of the traffic study before we can make any of those determinations.
So then could you talk about, because I know the city does traffic studies, not just when developers are doing this, but you guys do it for your own, guiding all the work that you're doing, roundabouts and everything else. What is the current plan, and like how close are we to the threshold, I guess, of widening? Because that one section of Woodgate by the rec center is great, right?
Yep.
And then you get this bottleneck right after that, and it's narrowed down right by the school. We've got everybody there picking up their kid an hour and a half beforehand just to try and get in that line. How close are we to anything being done on Woodgate? And then does this kind of push us over that, just from what you know from our existing traffic studies?
Yeah, Woodgate's been extra challenging with all the closures. A little better at the north end, obviously, now with Woodgate closed, but it's pretty ripe. I'll say it is in our capital plan. We have actually preliminary design complete for Woodgate, all the way from where we stopped at the realignment to Otter, including improvements at the intersections of Odell and Otter along the way. So those plans are in the hopper. They're not cheap. You know, that's another 20 or so million. These roads construction costs are just through the roof. And so, you know, it's finding that absolute sweet spot of when it's needed and putting our capital resources in the best place at the right time, which keeps all of us up at night, because it's, you know, as a growing community, not just local growth from housing, but tourism. You know, our post-COVID, our traffic counts are definitely on an exponential part of the curve, and it's a lot to stay ahead of. So we wish we could go out and build them all to a minor arterial standard today. Some wish we wouldn't, you know, because like it's been said, that does change the character of the road from a rural road, but now you have pedestrian facilities and everything's a trade-off. But, you know, in a perfect world, we'd build them all to that full standard right off the bat, but we have to be very surgical about the funds we have and where we can use them. So, long way of saying, nothing definitive on a Woodgate date yet, but it is, I mean, it's one of the riper projects within our capital plan.
Okay, and then, so no traffic study yet, but we will have one next time we reconvene on this subject. So if it's being presented to us, then that means that whatever design we're getting does meet the demands of that traffic study, right? Like you guys aren't going to bring us a plan if the traffic study says that plan isn't going to work, right? So
yeah, we would recommend not approving on account of that. If they, but that's never happened. We work with them and again, kind of try and find where the best place to, most efficient way to develop the property is.
So if the traffic study says that either less density or density's fine, but you would have to do X, Y, Z to Otter and or Woodgate, does that trigger that to happen sooner? Or does it just trigger it to move up in the hopper for the city to do something about it before the development's finished? Like, kind of, how does that play the timing for us?
Yeah, it's a fine line to thread, and there's no silver bullet answer to that one either. So typically, yeah, if it grossly doesn't meet, you know, like, we'll play the safety card essentially. If it shows that this cannot be supported, does not meet standards and is a safety hazard, we can very clearly say we can't approve the preliminary plat, which means you can't go forward with development of that scenario, which there's a lot of different scenarios. If you're good for now, but at 10 years at X point, this intersection will need to be improved, for example. You know, ultimately that gets folded into the recommendations. It's hard though, because it's ultimately City Council's decision. They control the capital budget of, you know, what and where, and we can make recommendations, but we can't guarantee some of those things. So a lot of times what you would see on a preliminary plat is you can build out to X units, and after that, this improvement needs to be done. Either they're doing it, or if it's done as a city capital project, and then you can continue with more development after that's done. So you kind of create a threshold there. That's a common kind of build-out scenario. But again, because, you know, nothing can be guaranteed at this stage, because we can't obligate future councils to a project that, you know, you can imagine, oh, why am I paying for this? I didn't have anything to do with that project 10 years ago. Now I can't do anything else, you know, those kind of things. So we kind of try and set that up to find that sweet spot. And those are definitely case by case, and those are talked about. If there are conditions or thresholds, those get incorporated into the plat and are part of this process publicly.
And then, could you talk a little bit about how the construction traffic is part of that assessment, or if it is or isn't? Because that road is narrow and Woodgate's narrow and already have problems, what does that mean for the construction phase and the impact that that has?
Yep, and there's two ways we handle that. So on the road standpoint, for everything that's proposed to be built, they have to account for not just their traffic that they'll generate, but all the through traffic that would come through. So like, the Bridges Drive extension, for example, all the traffic that would, is avoiding Townsend and using that, and also all of the construction traffic required for full build out of the subdivision, because that's your biggest loading. A truck is 100 times harder on a road than a car. And so we make sure that that's all sized appropriately for that loading, for its service life of the road itself. And then during construction, we work with them to try and this comes up on almost every subdivision of where's a great place to access the project and can you run all your access through there. It's not something we can necessarily enforce, but we try and, hey, here's an opportunity that you can access without impacting these roads. Can you take these routes for your primary construction access? Or, access directly off of the road and then have a kind of an internal gravel road to avoid, going down Woodgate, for example, and contributing, having trucks in with the school traffic and things of that sort. So that's something we work out with them, and it depends on phasing, depends on, all those various things. So it's definitely something we try and work out. It's not something we can strictly enforce necessarily, but their interests are usually the same too. They don't want to be stuck in that traffic either, so it usually works out pretty naturally.
Okay. Is there anything else on traffic? Chad,
Can you address the positive or negative perspective of connecting to Kinnikin?
Smart.
That one, we commented to it in our comments on the sketch plan of something that needed to be looked at closer. So the geometry down there is challenging. The right-of-way is challenging. There's a ditch through there that's, pretty wet area, marshy, things of that sort. So it's great feedback. Definitely do not have an answer on that. It's something that if it makes sense, the right answer is always connectivity. You can think of several places in town where you have to jog to get around and how maddening some of that is. The right answer from a planning standpoint is all of our roads connect and you don't have dead-end pockets of neighborhoods. But that being said, if it can't be done safely, we'd live with a dead-end pocket of a neighborhood. So that is something that would come through deeper in design to definitely look at. So I don't have an opinion on that one yet.
Anything else, guys? Yep, Ron?
For Scott. It brought up about the traffic on Ogden, which Phoebe kind of touched on, and then the roundabout. Just when will you finish the bridge, do you think, and when do you think the roundabout will be opened?
Yeah, so the reason for the gravel over the bridge was paving availability. So in order to not go into the winter season on the roundabout, which would extend the duration of closures and misery for all detouring around there, we had to switch over to the roundabout project. We obviously wouldn't close Ogden and Oak Grove at the same time. So that allowed us to reopen Ogden, move on to the roundabout. The pave date right now for Ogden is mid-May, but they are on a list in case there's any cancellations and openings in the paver schedule. That paving will be done with Ogden open, so they won't close it again. They'll use flaggers to get that work done, and it should take only 2 days. So just trying to limit impacts as much as possible. We didn't want to leave it closed, obviously, while we had to move on to the roundabout. The roundabout is scheduled for completion in September.
Is when?
September.
This September?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, this September.
You
This one's
learned a thing or two.
This one's a little easier.
A lot quicker at that.
Well, the nice part about this roundabout is there's not a lot of utility rework because it's all.
Is that going to be a 4-lane roundabout?
It's a 1.5 lane. So it's because the heavy turn movement coming down, because this is again kind of the planning and road connections thing. So, in a perfect world, Hillcrest would have extended through to Ogden and you wouldn't have to, and that's why Woodgate has so much traffic is it's doubling as, access to all those commercial centers, but everything that comes down Hillcrest and is avoiding Townsend is coming on to Woodgate also, and that's the card we were dealt. That's the only option to not have a bottleneck on Townsend, which would be even worse. And so because your primary movements are coming from the east towards the south, that roundabout has a dedicated lane specifically for that movement in order to keep the capacities up for long-term growth once Bridges Drive comes through and all those, and you see a lot more traffic on Oak Grove.
Also, the bridge, the traffic has knocked all the gravel out.
Yeah, they're out there almost daily. Yeah, trying to keep that down. Yep.
Thank you, that's it.
Scott, you said eventually, like way long down the road is a traffic light at the highway and Otter as it comes down. Is that the plan?
Correct, yep.
Correct.
So that's governed by the CDOT access control plan, and that calls for that to be a full movement lighted intersection.
Anybody else on traffic stuff for now? Nope. Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll bring the applicant back up here. Mr. Miles, you're back there still, I think, somewhere? Yep. State your name and address for us again.
Matt Miles, 1282 West Oak Grove Road, Montrose.
Thank you. Any feedback, comments that you have first before I let these guys ask questions?
You know, I've been doing development in Montrose for a long time. I think there were comments made that nobody on your board or at least city staff was here in 2008. I was here in 2008. I sat in the hearings when this property was originally zoned. So, not that that has any bearing on this, but Montrose is growing, and there's always, you know, nobody wants to see growth or change in their neighborhood. I get it. But it's me, good, bad, or indifferent. And I may be a controversial figure, but who else would you rather have? And this is a personal, self-gratifying statement, but who else do you want to have develop it? I do these developments from the beginning to the end, through the thick and the thin. And I'm always answering my phone, and I'm accountable. We've listened to the concerns. I've actually spoken to a couple of the people in Otter Pond, and we'll continue to have some conversations on ways that we might be able to soften that. But to this discussion, to the point of use by right and properly zoned, that's why we targeted that property and worked on buying it for 4 years and cleaned up litigation. We understand the density, that's why we bought it, but it is also our intention to build a successful project, which means it'll be done nicely. And Dry Cedar Creek, make no mistake, is a huge amenity to that property. It's a wildlife corridor, it's an open space with pedestrian ways for the residents in the community that we're building, and you know, I think it's pretty well put together. It was put together well when it was initially zoned back in 2008, and the project we build there will be an enhancement to the community. To your point, Mr. Fishering, of dropping into Denver and its wall-to-wall houses up through Morrison or wherever you said, you know, the natural continuation of infrastructure in Montrose in that part of town, northeast quadrant, is this piece of property. You've got all that fringe of development. You've got Otter Pond and the brook and the old Woodgate subdivision and all that development. And then the next step, of course, is what we call Leonard Farm. Other infrastructure considerations, and we'll deal with the traffic. The traffic, we've been working on it. You know, I sat through those South Corridor, you know, access hearings, you know, forever ago. We will deal with that, and we'll get the traffic dealt with. But there's other infrastructure out there that lends itself to density. The rec center lends itself to density, and we're right there, and there'll be pedestrian access down Ogden Road to the rec center. You've got all the shopping opportunities. By the way, the new Montrose Regional Health Building was built on a controversial piece of property that I developed 20 years ago, and then I sold the lot to Montrose Regional Health for that use. So everything comes out in the wash. It all comes around in a circle. I'm not here to plead my case in a preliminary plan setting here, but I did want to, you know, rebut some of the stuff I heard tonight. I understand that it's impactful. I get it, but it was zoned 17 approximate years ago, and we're gonna do a good job. We always do a good job, and I would challenge anybody that says we don't do everything we say we're going to do. So, may I answer any questions?
Yeah, do you guys have any questions for the applicant? Chad, go ahead, bud.
Okay, so let's walk through this map. I'm glad we have this up. And clearly we can see some lots that are smaller, some lots that are clearly bigger. I'm assuming, and this is, just give me a description of what the neighborhood's going to look like. I assume.
It's just really hard for us to see the little print on here. And you guys do have some
I
some
assume
notes,
that
but
there's a lot of, either they call them townhouses, duplexes, triplexes, tell us about how many units are going to be connected in some of these smaller lots that we can see?
Well, the lots that appear larger on that plat are multifamily lots for some type of multifamily housing, be it townhomes that we split up and sell individually, or perhaps even attached apartment type opportunities. The smaller lots on the cul-de-sacs and whatnot, depending on the zoning, those are single family. So the stuff down there on Otter that is our first phase, those are, Brad, are those attached or are those? The first phase we're doing off of Otter, are those attached houses or are those freestanding single family?
Mr. Miles, could you have him come up here if he's going to talk?
What's that?
Single family townhomes.
Okay, so townhomes in those narrow lots.
Hold on one second. Just turn my mic off. Sir, back there, if you come up here as well, please. Sorry, Brad, you want to come up and state your name and address for us and then answer the question, just so it's on the record, please? Yep. Thanks.
My name's Brad Yeager, 13010 5875 Road.
Cheers, Brad. Would you state the answer again?
So in the phase one, there's townhome, so single unit sellable townhome type offering. So that means fourplex, sixplex, each unit is sellable. And then also single family, detached.
And is the intention to have garages with all of those townhomes?
That is the intention as of now, yes.
Okay. And the city codes for parking are going to require, correct me, but 2 parking places off-street per unit. Correct? Am I correct, William? I've got a shaking of head yes from William.
Yeah, two off-street spaces per unit for single-family and duplex development. It's 1.5 spaces for multifamily.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just give you my typical speech I always give associated with parking, especially this is denser, which implies cheaper, which implies the working man, and that means the working truck. And please be sure to make sure the parking is big enough so that the truck is not extending into the sidewalk, into the street, et cetera, so that ultimately good flow still occurs with those big work trucks that will be not the construction work trucks, but the residents who are ultimately living there. To truly get those vehicles off the street is one piece of my advice and request associated with the design. I have to do it every time.
I mean, my house, you can't fit an SUV in, so let alone a truck. So,
Right.
yeah, it's,
Make it a useful parking space.
do you guys have any other questions for the applicant about what we've been shown?
Timeline. They
Yep.
asked about a timeline.
Yep, so there's 2 timelines, and the first one for you guys, the timeline that we'd like to get at least a idea is, you know, are you guys ready to move dirt tomorrow? Is this something where you get approval and then, you know, you're starting in a year, 5 years? What's it look like for you?
Well, we're gonna nibble around the edges, you know, as we can, doing different things to improve the property. Actually doing a subdivision with saleable lots would presumably happen over the winter, and we'll have saleable lots next year.
Okay.
And then we'll build it as fast as we can. Just like I did Bear Creek, it's 22 years old and we're 2/3 done. And just like Waterfall Canyon, we're 20 years old and we're 1/3 done, as fast as we can.
You guys got any other questions at this stage? Nope? Okay, thank you. Oh, hold on, wait. Oh,
This wasn't a
Jack.
question,
All
so,
right, oh, sorry.
this wasn't a question. This is a comment, and this goes back to the connectivity of the neighborhood, and back to your designer. Clearly, you haven't drawn on the bike paths and the walking paths into this design. Clearly, we want to encourage as much of that as possible, so whether they're the kids within the neighborhood or the neighborhood connecting to the rest of the sidewalk system and biking system, please just put in as much as possible to create that connectivity. Because we don't always need to use that big truck to get to Walmart, since it is so close and the rec center is so close. Let's find some other alternatives to get there safely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys, anything else? No? No? Then staff, would you please just let those folks that are still here know that kind of the timeline of how this, like the next phase of this project as it continues down the road?
Yeah, so assuming it does move forward, it will require a preliminary plat submittal. We don't even accept a preliminary plat until after the sketch plan hearing has been completed. So we don't have that at this time. We don't know when we're going to receive that. But when and if we do receive a preliminary plat application, it will be reviewed. It usually takes some time for it to be reviewed. Given the size of this, it will likely take quite a bit of time. And then, again, just to reiterate, it doesn't necessarily have to be a preliminary plat for the entirety of the subdivision, but when it is ready to go before the Planning Commission again as a preliminary plat, it will be publicly noticed again. It will be another public hearing, and then it will also go to City Council. As far as the timing of that, it kind of depends on when we receive the application. So at this time, we can't say anything or guarantee anything, but whenever we get it, it'll be noticed.
All right, thank you. So hopefully that gives you guys at least the idea that it's not happening tomorrow, and probably not anytime in the near future. So just keep an eye out for it. If you're concerned about not getting notified, if that happened to you this time for any reason, please reach out to the staff, and ask them if it's coming up or when it's coming up or whatever. But go on there's the resources are there on the city website to access the portal and stuff to see when, what's on the agenda and whatnot. So just keep an eye on that. Other than that, guys, nothing else. We're not making any decisions. So any other business, staff? Nope. Do we have a meeting next time?
The meeting's scheduled for April 23rd. I believe we will be canceling that. We don't have any items on the agenda for that.
For the 23rd?
Meeting. April 23rd, yeah.
Okay. Nope.
Yep,
Okay,
nothing.
cool. Sounds good. Well, let us know if it changes, I guess.
I have a quick question for Scott.
Yeah.
Rio Grande, when are you gonna punch Rio Grande through? I have people telling me, arguing with me, because I remember you saying that it's not going through with the maintenance. But they said that when they saw you on the forum, you said, yes, we are punching it through when you're putting through the maintenance. So it just is kind of confusing to me.
So yeah, and there's a website dedicated to that. If you go to our Moving Montrose Forward webpage, you can get all that information as well. But Rio Grande will punch through to the ambulatory care center, River Landing, down there. We've acquired all the property necessary to do that. And I don't know if we want to,
Guys,
you guys maybe go to the hall.
Sorry, folks, could you step out? Our meeting's not done yet, so you step out or have a seat.
So yes, it is punching through. We've acquired all of the right-of-way necessary to make that connection. But the construction of the final connection is not funded at this time. So with the new public works shop, we'll build the first 1,200 feet or so, and the roundabout at East Oak Grove, or it's scheduled to, pending council approval. The roundabout at East Oak Grove and Rio Grande, starting in early 2026. And then the design is complete, so we're pursuing funding, which is kind of a laughable statement at this time, to try and get federal funding or a grant, which are somewhat non-existent right now, to complete that project. So it's about another 16 million or so to finish from the public works shop to the ambulatory care center. So no small feat, but it is one of our highest priority capital projects because of essentially the bottleneck and
Just what your newsletter
capacity issues on town. What's that?
Just what the newsletter said.
Is that what it
They
says? Cool.
still argued with me. Thank you.
Yep. Welcome to our world. Yeah.
All right, guys, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, Phoebe.
I second.
Oh,
Second.
all right, thank you, Chad. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Meeting adjourned.
Meeting is officially canceled.